My pleasure to see you on the crowd at a special time. So I would like to present 4 points. Number one, the green development. My understanding of the green development, we human beings are facing the threat, common threat is common threat is climate change. And what we only can take the tactics to address the threat is the green development. What is the green development? My understanding is to meet the maximum of spiritual and material demand of human life with minimum of carbon emission. So also we can understand it as the first industrial revolution. Number two, is green technologies. Fundamentally, the green development relies on green technologies. What are the green technologies? My definition, my understanding is 4C sectors. 1C sector is clean technologies, includes the clean energy, the clean process of science, clean materials. Everything should be clean. Number two is calculating science technologies. Our human being in the very beginning of the science, paid attention to the calculating from the Greek science. So my saying is there are 4 apples. The number one is Adam and Eve. They had the forbidden fruit is number 1 fruit. And that means the curiosity is the science. So number 2 apple is Newton's apple. It is calculating in the science. And so that means it began to have the recent science. The number 3 apple is Turing's apple. That's combination of the computing with machine. So number 4 is Jobs' apple, combination with the calculating with the mobile cell phone. So that the calculating everywhere and every time. So number 5 should be the number 5 apple will be the calculating with life. The life will be calculated, and the calculating will have something in common with life. So I think the number 2C is the computing. So number 3 is healthcare. So number 3C is the biomedicine. So biomedicine will help us very much in the health field. So in the future, every promising solution will be fundamentally relies on the biomedicine, not other things. So number 4 is creating industry. That means we can use VR, AR, and a lot of technologies which can very much, we use very little carbon emission, and can meet a lot of demands. So that's the meaning. That's the meaning of green technologies. So number 3. So here I would like to raise a case for you. We scientists in the Chinese Academy of Sciences started to make our efforts for a green revolution or green technologies. One is the liquid sunshine. That means the number 5 of the generation of number 5, Maslow. We use the solar electricity to electrolyze water and then get hydrogen. And we use the hydrogen to combination or synthesis with the carbon dioxide and to produce methanol. And the 1 ton of the methanol can capture 1.735 ton of carbon dioxide and can generate 8,000 kilowatts electricity. So we already start to have this project, especially in West China, in Gansu province or in into Mongolia. So we are already taking the action. We are already on the way to implement the green development and with technologies. So number 4, my point is we need a international collaboration. So for the green technologies, I believe that once the technologies are in the developed countries, in European countries, and the market, the growing market is in the developing country, especially in China. So a very simple business model is we need to combine the supply side of green technologies with the demand side of green technologies. So we just need an ICC, such a kind of like ICC, the platform to make it as the meeting point, to make supplying side with the demanding side together to address the international issue. So I think the international collaboration is our best way to address the climate change issue. So I totally agree with the Prime Minister Lavran's points. We should unite together and to address the international issue or international crisis. I think that the climate change is our common enemy, common threat. They are coming, so we need to unite together. And I think to unite is the maximum of our common interest. So thank you.
I'd like to go in 3 steps. The first step is give you a little bit of context and talk a little bit about the specialty that is Germany's, my home country, and there has a lot of evolution been happening over the last couple of days and weeks on this topic. Then we're going to talk about the measures and the financing tools, and finally I'd like to give an outlook very briefly. Now, where do we stand? I think we have the context of the COP26, right? The commitments of the greenhouse gas emission reductions was already quoted. China has committed to be carbon neutral by 2060, the US and EU by 2050, and that's quite new, Germany has revamped that. So Germany was very much aligned with the EU up until a couple of weeks ago. And this is an interesting example of how society and say the next generation are influencing our politics today. In Germany, as you probably know, there has been a long-standing tradition of the environmental party and the environmental issues in the country since the 70s. And in as late as 2019, there was a new law passed, and it was also enshrined in the German Constitution, Article 28, that stipulated that by 2030 we should be down by 55% when compared to 1990, and by 2050 we should be ready with 100% reduction. Now, that in 2019 already was on the basis that Germany had dropped its greenhouse gas emissions to the level of 1942. So it had already gone a long way. And it had also surpassed its own reduction achievements for 2020 by 40.8%, which was arguably helped by the pandemic, but still it was a great achievement. So actually, Germany looked like being quite much on track. And then the Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court of Germany, ruled that's not good enough because it violates the liberty rights of the young generation, especially in Germany, because this is their constituency, but it goes on beyond well. Now, as you probably also know, we have a chancellor, Ms. Merkel, who will leave politics in September. And so we have an upcoming election. And we'd all say, would love to have a new female chancellor, of course. And to put it with the words of my younger daughter, who said, Daddy, can also a man be Kanzlerin, the female word of chancellor in Germany? Because, I mean, for 16 years, nothing else has ever been seen in the chancellery in Germany. So there is a lot of, say, movement in the German political situation today. And what was surprising, that within a couple of days following that ruling from the Supreme Court, the political parties got their act together and passed a new law. And the new law now says we have to be down by 65% in 2030, and we have to be zero carbon at 2045, which is stronger than the commitment we had before. And that's a little bit new. There are a couple of measures that go beyond 2030, because that was the main criticism by the Supreme Court. They say, well, you may have some ideas for the 20s, but there's nothing beyond 2030, so you have to be more concrete. Now, to sum it up, what the Germans want to do is they want to boost renewable energy. They want to lower the consumption of greenhouse gas emissions, and they want to increase efficiency of the industry, including savings of energy, which is the easiest thing to decrease the carbon footprint. And this is combined with the emission trading system of the EU that covers already 40% of the EU trades, which is a cap and trade system, which is actually pretty good and could serve as an example. However, it has a big flaw, and Madame Keller has elaborated on that. The world, unfortunately, does end neither at the borders of Germany nor at the borders of the EU. So it's nice to put that system in place, but if it's not a global system, then over time, it's probably bound to fail. Now, when we look at the sectors from a financial perspective, we need to have in mind that a financial investor, especially in the infrastructure side, has a very, very long-term view. And when I say long-term, speaking of the company I'd been working for previously, the longest asset we had ever bought was 120-year concession, and the average was 45 years. So it's really a long-term, it's generational. And so the question you ask yourself is, whatever you're going to buy, is it going to be value adding 45 years from now on average? That's the question you have to answer. And so hence, you'll have to look at the industries you're investing in. Obviously, it's energy, it's a building sector, the industrial sectors, they are more or less on track in Germany today. What's lagging behind seriously is transport and agriculture. Now, it's more or less similar when you look at the COP26 statements here. Now, what can be done on these sectors that we all have in mind in order to reduce the GEs? So first of all, it's pretty obvious. We need to boost the renewable energy. So we need to innovate. And I think it has been mentioned by Charles and some others before. If you look at the renewable energy sector over the last 2 or 3 decades, it's all started with wind. Maybe hydro was first, but that's pretty old. But wind was the big thing a couple of years ago. And today it's solar. And when you remember, like 20 years ago, the only solar producers were in Germany. Now there's none elsewhere else than in China. So everything comes in China, and China has been able to scale up the industry and to professionalize the solar panels to an extent that today the cost benchmark for energy, renewable energy, is solar and not gas as it was in the past. And so the question is, what's next? Is it geothermal? Is it hydrogen? A couple of question marks, but these are the questions that we as a financial industry need to answer, because we need to understand where the trend is going in order not to waste the money that retirees and institutional investors have given us as the industry in order to invest it long term. So it's pretty clear what we have to do today. It's less clear what we have to do tomorrow, but more importantly even is the question, what should we not do? So for instance, everybody knows no coal, and has been already alluded to in the past. Okay, fine, but no coal in China today is difficult, or in India. What about gas? I mean, cut Germany off the gas stream from Russia, lights go out. So you need the gas as a bridge technology. You like it or you don't, but it's a matter of fact. And then take the topic of nuclear. You ask anybody in the street in Germany, nuclear, it's an absolute no-go. It's completely anti-ecological, because this is the origin of the movement of the Green Party in Germany. You ask the same question in France, you probably get pretty much the opposite answer, because it's very green, because it doesn't pollute, right? So there are a couple of unanswered questions that I think we need to answer collectively, jointly, in this regard, regarding renewable energy. On the building side, I think it's a little bit more local, because it's about isolation, the material, efficiency, passive buildings and stuff. It's very granular, it's local, and I think that is being handled by the industry, and that is speaking for itself. The industry, I think we all agree with that we need to foster and support eco-friendly technologies and companies, but the biggest upsides is with the laggards. So those who pollute the most should be, I think, in the limelight, and we need to tackle those rather than going down the beaten track. Major issue is transport. I said that. It's about cars, planes, ships, rockets maybe tomorrow. That very much goes back to the consumer behavior. And as long as the consumer does not buy into the changes that we attribute to that kind of industry, I think we're not going to reach the targets on the transport. And more or less the same is true for agriculture, because there's a very delicate equilibrium between the ecological footprint on the one hand and providing enough food to feed 8 billion people tomorrow on Earth. So one could say it's pretty easy. Let's finance the do's and stop the don'ts. But in real life, unfortunately, as we have to think very long term, it's not that simple. So we have to be a little bit more granular in our approach. And when I take the example we have taken in Allianz Capital Partners in the past, we had established a blacklist. And on that blacklist, there was a couple of things of don'ts, and obviously there's coal, there was some other stuff in there. But we also had some do's, and especially on renewable energy, solar, very much. But I think Mr. Lebin alluded to that. We very much focus on the evolution of research and science. New technological solutions, the digital transformation, and the increase of effectiveness and efficiency, that was the driver of the decision-making in infrastructure investment. Now, when you look at this in the wider picture, can we do this alone as a company? No. Can we do it alone as a country? Neither. Not even as a continent, Europe or so. But we have to somehow find a way of doing this together. We need to align our understanding and our approach, first and foremost between China and the EU, but also globally. And we all know that the multilateral institutions have difficulties of keeping pace. They're a little slow, they're a little complex, but I'm with Prime Minister Referent, we need to reform that rather than to cut it off. And we also have seen in the past that the recent presidency in the United States has shook up a lot of preconceived notions and beliefs. And I think it was especially, say, clear for Europe that they would have to start to think and act for themselves rather than to rely on Big Brother on the other side of the Atlantic. Now the tide is turning, but you know, there is an election in 3.5 years from now, so, and maybe a midterm even in 1.5 years. So we don't know how reliable that movement is. And I think we shouldn't be fooling ourselves. We cannot rely on sort of politicians that are being elected every couple of years and may change the tide. So we need to develop a plan from the industry, the financial sector, and especially the peoples ourselves together. What I found particularly stunning was the recent decision of the G7 to establish the B3W. Because, I mean, this is more or less a reaction to the Belt and Road Initiative, which is already up and running for some years. And okay, fine, if you detect a business model that's working, then you copycat it, it's good. But it looks like it's meant to be a competition. And whilst I totally like competition, because I think competition will foster energy and will also result in good evolution, I think we are here at a wider scale. We cannot allow ourselves to destroy value by unnecessarily competing on different things. So why don't we just align our interests and specialize? Take, for instance, the solar sector. China has specialized, and it doesn't make any sense in trying to sort of take that away again, or try to look at the infrastructure, greenfield versus brownfield. Chinese investors are much more open to greenfield investments, while European or North American investors are much more prone for brownfield. So there could be a good sharing of the sectors, of approaches to investments between ourselves. We obviously want to involve national institutions as well, because besides the international multinational ones, we have KfW, we have the IFC, the Japanese. We need the EU fund, so there's enough money, there's enough energy in the system. And I think we need to do that, to increase the firepower and to learn from the mistakes of early movers like Germany, because Germany will do some mistakes, and we can probably all learn from that. But I think what is most important is that we don't ask ourselves the question, who is right? Is it China? Is it Europe? Is it G7? Is it the Belt and Road or the B3W? Or who is stronger and who will win? That's not the question, because it's always nature at the end of the day that's going to be stronger. It's always nature that's going to be winning at the end of the day. So if we want to change the course of that evolution today, I think we have to work together. It's not possible to try to sort of march separately and strike separately. If we cannot march together, we still have to strike together. Thank you very much.